to the final session of the FPSO World Congress Live 2020. I am personally very excited, and I hope all of you are excited too for the final session of this Congress. For the final session, we have one more presentation for the market intelligence, and it's going to be on assessing the reality of the global COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the FPSO industry, something that's very relevant and close to all of our hearts. So without further ado, I'd like to once again welcome Dave to introduce our speaker. Dave, please.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, we got our final speaker right now, and without turning this into a public health World Congress, we've had a lot of discussion over last week and today of the environment that we're in, how public health issues have disrupted the energy market and the progress on some of our projects. But it's also been a good story. We've had good project experiences as people have demonstrated resilience. We've talked about technology tools that are helping us reduce costs. We've just finished a good panel with some funding and finance sources talking about what the prospects are. And so we wanted to close with another update from Joe Friedman, who's a senior analyst, energy service research at Rystad Energy. He specializes in the offshore rig and oil service market, and he has a master's degree in economic analysis with research distinction from Norwegian School of Economics. And he's been working in their corporate headquarters in Oslo before joining the company's Singapore office. So another good perspective on our market, and look forward to hearing what Joe has to share with us. So Joe?
Thank you, David. Let me see if I can share my screen here now. Okay, thank you. So I hope everyone can see my slides now.
Great. Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, already my presentation has been introduced quickly, but just to show the agenda for today, we see now that kind of a second wave of the COVID-19 is starting to impact us all, and I'm going to have a look at how this can impact the FPSO markets and also the other service markets before we're going to go and look into more on the cost side, both related to the lease OPEX for some specific fields, but also how to streamline FPSO development cost in the current price environment. So this slide is to kind of set the stage a little bit and kind of see where we are. This chart shows the world liquids demand year on year, and we saw that the demand for oil fell during the financial crisis, but after that we have seen a very stable demand growth. And in our pre-coronavirus expectations, we expected the market to increase with around 800,000 barrels per day. But now what we see is that by the end of the year, we can see as much as 10 million barrels being removed from the global oil balance. And this is a demand shock that we've never seen before. And the big question that the industry is asking, and I guess everyone is asking, is like how long will this last, and how long will the levels remain low? And we'll investigate that over the next couple of slides. So we tracked the infection rates, the road and the flight traffic data for most countries globally. Here I've selected just 3 of them, so I'm going to represent it by the US, India, and Brazil. And oil demand is to a large extent driven by road traffic and flight traffic, and road transportation actually makes up as much as 53% of the global oil consumptions. So what we have seen is that now that the economies are opening up more and we have less restrictions, especially road traffic are slowly picking up. Here you see from these countries that we have been down more than 40% compared to 2019 levels, but now we are moving more towards 20% down from 2019. And overall, we expect road fuels to be down around 9% in 2020. If you look at the flight traffic, it's a little bit more of a pessimistic story. I mean, all of these countries are down more than 50% compared to 2019, and we expect that jet fuel demand will be down around 44% in 2020 by the end of the year. So and unfortunately, when we now see the societies are opening up more, we also see, as you can see for the US here, and a new wave of potential cases arising, and we see that in the US and Europe, while the numbers are still high in for example, India and in Brazil. So what does this have to say for oil demand? In our kind of base case scenario, where we see more a limited second wave as the most likely development, we expect oil demand to settle around 89 to 90 million barrels per day in 2020. However, it remains uncertain how large a second wave outbreak will be and how it will be mitigated by governments across the world. But it can result in a quite careful opening of societies, much more slowly opening that we saw here in June and July, and illustrated by the yellow line in this chart. We expect it could be another dip in oil demand, and we could end up between 87 and 88 million barrels per day of oil demand in 2020. And total demand can actually stay below 2019 levels all the way out to 22, early 23. So what has this to say for the service market? Looking at the impact, it's been quite dramatic already. This shows the revenues for the top service companies, and now we have gathered a lot of the data for the first half of the year, and we see that if you compare it to 2019, the first half of 2019, it's like the revenues are down around 19%. And this is mainly due to quite weak second quarter revenue numbers for the service companies. Overall, we expect the service market to come down around 24% this year. But if we see kind of a stronger second wave of COVID-19 and potentially then lower oil prices, we can kind of face a more challenging second half of the year. And that could potentially result in another 4% decline, bringing the service market down 28% this year. We think that if we will have a strong second wave, then it's the North American shale industry that will be mostly impacted, because we are already kind of see recovering in the completion activity in the US shale. So if we get more strict more restrictions, then we expect that market to be hit quite hard. But also, we also see that it will impact the conventional onshore and the offshore space, but not to the same extent. So maybe down between 2 and 3% extra compared to our base case over the full year of 2020. I think everyone in the industry has felt the restrictions and how challenging it has been to keep projects progressing as planned since March this year. We have already seen several projects being delayed. For the FPSO industry, was a good uptick in the number of projects being sanctioned over the last couple of years, and therefore there is a large backlog of projects under construction or on order. So of course this can be challenging given the current situation, and if we see another wave of COVID making it even more difficult, then the risk of these projects being delayed is even higher. After a couple of slides that has kind of had a negative spin to it, I think the view that we have on the FPSO market is actually overall quite positive. We saw also during the last downturn that the FPSO market, due to long contract terms and long lead times, it's one of the more resilient offshore markets. And this chart shows our expectations for E&P spend for greenfield surface CapEx and for lease OpEx. And we actually expect an uptick this year due to the ongoing projects that's in the pipeline. And we also expect when oil prices increase again, that we will see quite a steep uptick in CapEx spend for FPSO projects. When it comes to the lease OpEx, we expect that there will be FPSOs that goes off contract this year that won't be re-contracted, and also some contracts are linked to production volumes. So we expect that the lease OpEx will decrease a little bit towards 21 before we expect it to increase again. Now we'll jump over to more the cost side, and we'll start by looking at the lease OpEx and the OpEx in general. So before we look into the lease OpEx specifically, I wanted to show this chart that shows the overall development in deep water OpEx per barrel from 2013 towards 2020. And the industry has done a tremendous job bringing OpEx down since 2013. And even though like most of the regions in the world has seen a decrease, South America, mainly driven by Brazil, has managed a 50% reduction in its deep water OpEx within 8 years. So bringing it from 26 USD per barrel to about 13, which is quite impressive. So why is that the case, and how has that happened? First of all, we have seen increased production from, especially from Brazil, and the fact that the Brazilian real has decreased its value against the USD by 55% since 2013 has of course helped the OpEx or brought the OpEx down. But another key reason is that Petrobras has switched out a lot of its FPSO, large part of its FPSO fleet. So Petrobras increased its fleet of owned FPSOs by 16, while it reduced the number of leased FPSO by 6 from 2013 to 20. And as many as 8 of the 10 fields in Brazil that with startup year from between 2018 and 20 have been developed with an own FPSO. And in addition to these factors already mentioned, the fields in South America is also getting younger, and these requires less maintenance than the mature fields that typically require quite high OpEx. So over 110 mature fields has been abandoned in South America over the last 8 years. And we see in this chart that a large share of the production is now coming from newer fields, here represented as producing early. The split here represent how much the fields have been producing of its original resources. The reason why I wanted to highlight kind of the cost reduction we've seen in South America is that during April and May this year, we saw that deepwater production in Brazil was quite resilient, also in very low oil prices. So while the number of producing wells in Brazil fell by more than 15%, this was a combination of shut-in wells or wells that needed maintenance, but kind of among the wells that are kind of in a bad economic group that accounted for 130 to 140 wells. 90% of those were from fixed installations, and you see here it's only 25 of these wells that was shut down was related to FPSO projects. So with oil prices recovering again now to above 40 USD per barrel, the production in Brazil has had a strong comeback, and with the June output was already at pre-COVID-19 levels. Moving back to the global market and zooming into the fields that are kind of the late producing fields, meaning fields that has produced more than 75% of the regional resources. That is kind of the selection of fields we're looking at here. And the combined free cash flow from these fields in 2019 was at a comfortable level around 11 USD per barrel. Now, with the lower oil prices, this has come down, and we expect it to settle around $2.2 per barrel. However, we estimate that actually 40% of the selection of 96 fields will have a negative cash flow, which is a little bit worrying. But given our base case oil price outlook that we expect to be around 50 for 21 and around 70 for 22, we see that the free cash flow for these fields is expected to go back to almost 19 levels by 2022. But as production rates for these late life production fields stagnate, free cash flow will also quickly return into decline and ultimately threatening the profitability of many of these FPSO assets. So operators with fields falling into the red, they are forced to cut the production OPEX in order to kind of mitigate the effects of low oil prices. If this is insufficient, then a decision of prematurely shutting down production might be the most rational choice to make for the operators. So this is showing the net present values for FPSO fields by different life cycles. The net present value for the late life producing fields, they stand at around $3 per remaining barrel. Although this is a positive overall, our analysis of these 96 FPSOs that have already produced more than 75% shows that 30 to 40% of these are estimated to have a negative net present value. And the kind of the worst scoring in terms of net present value for these fields are the one that has the least FPSO, and on average, these fields actually have a negative net present value of 2.9. So this puts not only the operator in an uncomfortable position, but also the FPSO suppliers that are kind of forced with two possible outcomes, and none of them are very favorable. So either the FPSO contract can either be renegotiated by a lower day rate in order to bring down the lease OPEX and then make these fields, make the net present value of these fields positive. Or the worst case scenario is that the operator will early terminate the lease contract. So this is, now we're only talking about a small share of the market, this late producing fields, a more positive story about the other type of fields. So jumping over to the more development cost, there are different ways of bringing down the cost. There's been a lot of talk about that already in this World Congress. So you both have phase developments, you have right-sized top-side scope, and standardization can all help the operators to bring down the cost of the projects. In the following slides, I will mainly be focusing on the standardization and put some numbers to the potential cost gains we can see from standardization. I think it's important when you talk about the cost of developing a field is that the FPSOs, they fulfill a broad spectrum of requirements, and illustrated in these two charts, we see there's a large range in both production capacity and also the operating water depth. So you have marginal fields that produce less than 10,000 barrels per day, up to the Egina FPSO by Total that produces more than 200,000 barrels per day. And also in terms of water depth, you have a lot of shallow water projects like Area 1 in Mexico, and it goes up to a Shell Stones project in the Gulf of Mexico that's close to 3,000 meters water depth. And therefore, when you compare FPSO development costs, it's a very different cost profile for a lot of these projects, and this can be shown in the slide here. So here we are comparing the total greenfield cost for developing these are fields that have been developed over the last 15 years, a selection of them, and a high cost project, the Egina FPSO built by Samsung Heavy Industries, cost around 16 billion to produce for the total development cost. This FPSO has a production capacity of 250,000 barrels per day, and the experienced high capital cost mainly due to challenging deep water depth of the project. But yeah, we see here there's a large spread in the development cost, and of course you can kind of compare the total cost with the production capacity, but it's also different reasons why these costs vary between the projects. One to highlight, I guess, is the ExxonMobil's Liza Destiny FPSO, offshore Guyana. This achieved startup way ahead of schedule and less than 5 years after the hydrocarbons was discovered, which is way faster than the average of a deep water development projects these days. So SBM Offshore has used this opportunity to showcase its capabilities and build a strong relationship with Exxon to collaborate with the future projects coming up in Guyana. And the Liza Unity FPSO that was awarded a couple of years ago is kind of the first project that is very standardized under the FPSO fast forward program that SBM has, and shown in this slide here. SBM they experienced or they gained a lot of experience during the Liza Destiny project, and it kind of allowed the FPSO project team to fast track the Liza Unity, as many of the SBM members from the originally Destiny development were transferred over to the Unity project. And this project is an example on how standardization enables cost cutting by multiple avenues. And I will show some of these in the next slide, but it's also it's setting the standard for the industry, and also MODEC is doing now something similar, and they've already been awarded 2 contracts, one in Bacalhau, Equinor in Brazil, and Barossa is delayed, but in Australia, but it's also for a more standardized new build hull. So standardization can be a powerful strategy, allowing the application of previous learnings to the early design phase of subsequent projects. So this is illustrated by an FPSO project that could cost $1.5 billion USD, and standardization could sum up to about 15% cost savings, and that is around 250 million USD in potential savings. So just to go through some of the aspects, the project management team, the cost can be reduced mainly due to a faster schedule that reduces the overall work hours, and repeatability also reduces the need to have large owner teams. On the engineering side, you can basically skip the FEED and go directly into to FEED review. So the idea is to design one, build many. On the equipment side, you can reduce costs from long-term relationship with suppliers, and also more fit for purpose type of kits. On the construction side and installation, and it's related to repeatability, and repeatability drives increased efficiency. So overall, there's quite large potential cost savings in standardization. But however, there's not every part of a project that can be standardized to the same extent. So what we see now is typically that the hull and power generation is quite easy to standardize. But when it comes more to the oil and gas processing system, and especially the mooring system, it will require more customization from the companies. So the ease of standardization is shown in the chart to the right. So everything from 90% for the hull and all the way down to 20-30% for the mooring system. So I think this kind of summarized what I wanted to talk through today. So thank you for your time, and if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was interesting, fascinating to see the range of cost trends across the different regions. The attractiveness of Asia and Africa, and to some extent South America over the rest of the world was very interesting, and maybe that'll give some impetus to some new FPSO projects in Asia and Africa. I was wondering, you showed that the 30 to 40% of the late life production fields had a negative NPV. How common do you maybe see people trying to shape the lease rates more in line with the production of an FPSO, instead of having a flat rate to bias the rate early? That's when the funding and finance guys want to get paid back anyways. And if you want to keep that asset profitably engaged late life, you need to think about reducing that end of life lease rate. Do you see that happening very much? You're on mute.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And the thing is, I don't think we have seen too much of that in the market currently. So we have just been looking at this from a pure revenue perspective, and we see the need for something to change in order to keep these late life assets going. But we haven't, when we talk to people in the industry, I haven't really heard about any change in the format of the leased OPEX contracts quite yet. But I mean, this can change.
Sure. No, I think it was interesting your view of the price, the impact of a second wave. I guess that's the big $1 million question. Will there be a second wave of COVID, or have we learned enough from the first wave of more people wearing masks, more social distancing, more use of gloves? As the resilience that people have either had or learned help us fight off a second wave, that'll be a good challenge to our industry. Do you think people have some optimism about that, or is it just a big unknown?
Yeah, I mean, sitting here in Asia, I think here I feel there's more optimism around it. There's no doubt that the Latin American market will be important going forward, and seeing the development that we see in Brazil currently, I think it's quite worrying. And there's also yards in Brazil that do parts of these projects, even though the situation in China is getting better. So I would say it's a little bit of a mix. Definitely sitting here in Asia, I feel the optimism in the industry, and things are getting better for sure.
Yeah, sitting here in Europe and seeing the progress of the lockdown, it's quite a contrast when we talk to people in Singapore and hear that, oh yeah, we've been open since July, and there's people here in Europe that still haven't even gone back to the office. So there is and then other countries, as you mentioned, Brazil, where they're still suffering a lot of daily cases and trying to struggle to adjust. So hopefully that second wave that Asia can lead us by demonstrating how to have the right resilience.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I think the market is trying to respond to your standardization thing. It's been good to see people rolling out hulls and demonstrating that this is possible. It's a good challenge to operators, maybe the field operators, to try to be less picky in what they want from the FPSO and try to go with some of the standard solutions a little bit more to get their costs down. Do you think the operators might start responding to this standardization challenge?
I mean, I hope so. If in order for offshore project to be competitive, you can't always force the service companies to take the hit. So I think it's important that the operators and the service companies work together in order to keep the break-even prices low, in order for everyone to see activity remaining at a high level going forward. I mean, this I guess from the FPSO side, it's the operators are already complaining about high lease OPEX for some of these new FPSOs that will enter the Brazilian market and wanting to go over from a lease contract to more a turnkey type of contract in order to bring down the costs. So I mean, to what extent they will be willing to accept all this standardization that now the service companies are putting forward, it's a little bit hard to say, but I hope so for the industry, and I think it's necessary for the industry in order to be competitive. I mean, you have a new supply source from shale that will always be there to take additional market if prices were supposed to go back to high levels.
One of the things I would like to see added to your list of streamlining FPSO costs is, of course, one of the highest costs OPEX is people. So the use of digital transformation technologies and tools is an opportunity to support those people on board the ships, but maybe reduce the numbers. So have remote technical experts working with the people on board the ships, having multidiscipline operations and maintenance teams, smaller teams, and everything is a good way to get our OPEX down, and especially late life. Hopefully we've learned a lot about the asset over the life of it to be a little more proactive and not just wait for things to break, but know how to run them in good integrity operating windows and do maintenance right, sooner, quicker, correct the first time. So that'll be a good challenge to our industry.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Joe. We appreciate sharing all your stuff. I hope some of those slides are able to be shared with us in the later. I quite liked a lot of them.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, well, it's come to the end of the Congress. Time for me to have a few closing remarks before I hand back to Jamie. I think it was very positive, very informative Congress. We've seen the whole spectrum from how projects have demonstrated resilience. The theme of the conference was navigating the global pandemic and volatile oil prices. We certainly have seen all of that. It's hard to imagine it being any more challenging than we've seen, but companies have tried to stay generally positive and react to it in an appropriate way. We had some good advice last week about don't just blame everything on COVID. You're always going to have challenges in projects, so you have to try to react in the best way possible, manage change, keep track of what's going on. Where you need to shift over to things like night shift working, like Energian's done on their FPSO, and try to minimize the negative impact. We've seen some of the presenters over this Congress share with us new technologies, whether that's in digital transformation technologies and tools, or technical solutions for some of the components of our FPSOs. It's been very encouraging. People are working hard to reduce the CapEx. We're working hard to reduce OpEx to get the life cycle costs down. The market is there if we can react to it. We're all sort of hoping for the vaccines to come in for COVID, to give a little bit more cushion to allow the market to react. I think we would like to see the oil price to break through $50 a barrel, but it more than anything needs to be sustainable. So we've had a lot of oil price in the $40 range. In the last week or so, it has weakened to the lower 40s, but we need to get that to be sustainable for a longer period of time, and hopefully over the course of 2021 get back above $50 to give people the confidence to proceed on. It was nice from Joe's slides to show how the break-even price of dollars per barrel is getting down in some parts of the world, and to give us the ability to keep going. It was good to hear from the funding and finance experts in Ben's panel. Thank you to all those guys for sharing with us what we have to do to stay competitive, to attract capital, to attract funding and finance, how we can manage all this risk. And so I think overall, it's been a very positive conference, and I appreciated IQPC and FPSO Network bringing us all together. It's been great. We've learned a lot, and I think a positive attitude has been encouraging to all of us. So thanks very much from me, and I'll hand back over to Jamie now.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you so much for your time. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend our greatest thanks to all our sponsors for making this happen. Of course, to all our speakers for taking the time to share with us your valuable insights, and to all of you for hanging through and powering through all 5 days of the event. I would like to once again highlight that we have a couple of upcoming events available for you to register. Registration is complimentary, of course. So first up, we have an upcoming webinar on the 16th of September that is in 2 weeks' time. It's on FPSO shutdowns and turnarounds. And we also have the FPSO Brazil Congress Live that is happening on the 9th to 12th of November 2020. So if you'd like to register, simply head over to the FPSO Network booth that you can find on the virtual exhibition page. We have uploaded the URLs for you to download. If you don't, for you to access the links. If you don't see it, please hit the refresh data button. Otherwise, just simply Google these 2 events and you'll be able to get there. Once again, thank you all for your time, and we hope to see you guys soon in person next year at FPSO World Congress 2021. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and take care.